Hello, everybody. This is Jan Moray and my co-host Mona Duncan for another edition of Greet the Week. And today's topic is holding difficult conversations. That's a topic that we need to do more of these and learn how to do them, right, Mona?
Well, it seems like that we need to. And so, I've just been kind of thinking about, well, we can look at ways to do things and we can get new information, but unless we practice it and put it into effect, we don't know if it's good information or not.
Right.
And so it's just some ways that has been effective in my own personal life at looking at, how I have spoken up when it would have been more judicious had I not spoken up, at least to the degree that I did. Or those times when I didn't speak up and it would have been more judicious had I.
Yeah.
And so it's learning to do that. It's knowing when to and when not to. It's not a one size fits all. But it's to looking at the fact of becoming aware. And as I go through this, my steps are to become aware, to voice it, to take a time out, to give up being defensive or offended, and to always regard yourself and others, and then to end it up with being aware.
Yeah.
And it's in a different awareness. The first awareness is being aware of how the information is affecting me, either positively or negatively. And then the ending awareness is how have I responded to that, and is it effective or not? And looking back at the times that it has been effective, and how can I build on that? And the times that it wasn't effective, and how can I reprogram that?
Yeah.
It's kind of where I was looking at going. So, is there any comments or?
Well, I was just thinking, you said sometimes that you say something, then later you think that you maybe shouldn't have spoken up, and other times when you didn't speak up and you think that you should have. But how do you know unless you speak up whether you should have spoken up or not? Because
Right.
even those times that you might think that you should not have spoken up, maybe it does start a conversation that wouldn't have been started otherwise.
Well, true. And so, with the theory that we're always doing the best we can,
Right.
that under the circumstance, maybe that was the best that we could do. But it's the fact that however we spoke up and, maybe later decided it would have been judicious not to have or to have, as we begin to evaluate those things and learn from them and begin to educate ourselves. Because the fact of the matter is, everyone is a teacher that teaches us, but we are the only ones that learn.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not going to learn anything if we don't want to.
No, we're not.
Because we just have this free will, and, I don't want to learn it, I don't want to know how, I'm just not going to learn it. No matter how much we are drilled or coerced or threatened or tempted or, given rewards or anything, if we don't want to do it, bottom line is we're not going to.
Right.
We may get real passive and, I couldn't help it, and place all kinds of blames and so forth. But when we get honest with ourselves, and so part of that being aware is getting honest. It's getting honest with who we are and what, it's getting honest with knowing our own values, our own values, what we value. And can we, what are not only what we value, but also what are our boundaries, and what is the boundary breaker? And
yes, we tend to go to information that is congruent with the things that we believe already. And so then it's difficult for someone to change our mind, because the reason we learned whatever it was we wanted to learn was something that made sense to us and confirmed what we believed already. And so those things that go contrary to that, we'll push that aside. We don't want to learn it. We don't want to go there.
And even if the pushing that's coming toward us is quite off-putting, we may get even to the point of being super off-putting simply because we don't want to change our mind.
Right.
Because if it worked before, it's got to work again. Except that it doesn't. I mean, things do change. We change. We every day we're getting a little bit older. Every day we're changing. In our physiology, it's like every 7 years, everything in our body has reproduced itself, either for healthiness or for decline.
Yeah.
And it is realizing that that's in our attitude, in our embracing of life and people and difficult conversations and all of that. And so it's getting honest with ourselves, being aware, knowing what our boundaries are, and seeing if that boundary, it may be a deal, but is it a deal breaker?
Yeah.
And I find so often, this is a deal. And I'm talking about laws and, it is a deal. But is it a deal breaker? And can I find something with this individual, with this group, with this, to have some commonality?
Right.
As we can find some commonality there, then we cannot be so adversive with each other about the things that we're maybe not in full agreement with.
In fact, I was reading something not too long ago just exactly about that. When you can't convince somebody to change their mind. You can't make them change their mind, no matter how much you try. But the way to start, if you're going to be successful, the way to start is to find some commonality, find some common ground, and find a common goal. If we're both trying to reach the same goal, maybe we have different ideas of getting there. But if we start and focus on the goal, then maybe the ways we get there, we can discuss it, talk about it a little better, and be more willing to accept the other person's way.
Right. And anytime we speak out, for whatever reason, always speak out, go high, not low. Always speak out with the more positive. Always speak out with regard. Always speak out in love. Always listen in love. Even when we're hearing things we don't want to hear. Just listen in love. Listen in caring. Listen in human decency. Because more and more, with all the woes of our universe, and one of those woes of the universe is the fact that there's so few things that as collectively we are in agreement with. And often it's it's realizing that all of our choices do affect others.
Oh, absolutely.
Speaking up, not speaking up, soling up, whatever. Everything we do, all of our choices do affect others. And as we've discussed before, a lot of times the things that we talk about is just like a one-on-one thing. But back with Jung and our collective unconscious and how that we're all tied together and we all affect each other, even within that, even though it is a one-on-one thing, as that relationship changes, it's automatically going to affect a change in others also. There was a thing that I think it was on one of the news programs this morning. I forget which one Garland always has on. But anyway, it was about this guy, this boy that was being bullied. And his dad, talked with the young boy being bullied and asked him what his bullier was doing to him or how he was bullying him and so forth. And so the dad wanted to, not have his son be bullied anymore. And so the dad made an appointment and went to visit with this guy that was the bullier. Mm-hmm. And he asked him, he said, rather than saying, why are you doing this to my son? He started off right up front with asking him what others were doing to him.
Ah, all right.
How are you passing on? I know. How are you passing on a negative response? And the young man said, well, the people was always making fun of him because he couldn't afford the clothing and so forth that they wore in his school and everything. And so the dad stopped by and picked up his son, and he took both of them shopping.
Oh.
And he bought this guy that was being bullied a couple of outfits that would, give him the confidence. So at least I'm wearing the same brand you guys are, if that's what you're bullying me for. Not that we need to conform. That's not the issue here. It's the issue is what is uncomfortable with you? How can we help to heal it?
Yeah.
And so the two boys became good friends. And now this thing has gone viral. I mean, it was on the big news of the morning,
Well, that's wonderful, because that's what we need to do. We need to talk to the people who are bullying us or doing things that we don't like. Because so many times we just ignore them. We just say that they're horrible people, and then we talk to everybody else
and tell them how horrible they are. Yeah, rather than finding some commonality there. And hurt people, and whole people heal people. And as we become whole, by realizing what our values are and acknowledging when we're hurt.
Right.
Not letting ourselves know I'm offended, but I don't want to stay there.
Exactly. And that's the point. That's a very important point, because a lot of people want to stay there.
Right. Right. And we do choose our misery. And I get a little accolades whenever I stay there. Somebody will give me a pat on the back.
Right. You get attention. You do get attention. And that's why we stay there, because we get attention.
Right. But it's such a negative way, such a degrading way of getting there.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed lately, or for quite a while actually, is that many people refuse to admit their mistakes. And I believe that on an individual level and on a country level, if we don't admit our mistakes, we will continue to make them. And I think it's become fashionable now with our current resident of the White House, never admit your mistakes. Never. And this adds, this is a level of dishonesty that's become quite respectable now. It's a dishonesty in our country. It drives me crazy, and I believe that on any level at all, on a one-on-one personal level, but on a much larger level, it's becoming a big problem. Do you see that?
We can make it more of a problem in our own lives, and then we can get all irritated and angry and frustrated. And I'm not dismissing the fact that there are issues. There are major issues.
Yes.
That getting angry.
Thank you.
Major issues.
Yeah, we're talking destroying Earth, destroying.
Always take the high road. And even in our own selves, whatever I'm just so angry about this. I'm so upset about this, and acknowledging that, getting honest with it. But, have you ever heard that, if someone will give you a compliment, kind of juicing you up, and then they say, but, and you disregard everything they said before because that but's going to turn it in the other direction? Well, that's exactly what I'm asking myself to do. Is that anytime it's all those things that I'm so frustrated about this and I'm so frustrated about that, but I want to turn it around to the fact that there's something good there that's going to help me to completely dismiss. Something good about not admitting your mistakes? What would that be? Well, the fact that that there is a higher power that will eventually stumble us up.
Recognizes the mistakes and is going to punish them eventually.
And having enough value internally that whether or not there are others that are just grasping on to what I might think is a lie or what may the fact of the matter is eventually it will show itself to be what it is.
Because you can't make somebody admit their mistakes.
No, right. You can't. Of course you can.
You can't. And that was one thing that I heard a lot when I was in the corporate world, was that you never say you're sorry. You never admit things, and that's
what I was going to say.
Excuse me?
That's what I was going to say, is that I don't know that whatever I happen to think or not think about whoever's sitting in a certain colored house and, in DC, I think that, you see it with anyone who has power.
Yeah.
That there's become this culture of like, it is never okay to say I'm sorry because you're admitting that you did something wrong, and that somehow tarnishes your reputation. And I think that's really sick and sad.
No, I
Thank
agree.
you. Hey, thank you.
It's not,
Here,
but
I want to read you a quote. I want
the
to read you.
previous
This is
president
from,
and the next president will also do that. It's not just this guy who happens to be whatever you think about, right? Whether you think he's a godsend or a devil send, or somewhere. I mean, and that's part of the issue, is the polarization.
Exactly.
Right? Is the and the naming and the labeling and the that to me that's a big part of the issue, and that you're not willing to hear what the person's accurately saying or trying to say.
And when I'm part of that polarization, that's going to keep the negative going.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's whenever I decide to step out of that and have some compassion for whether they are admitting mistakes and reveling in it because they're such the underdog, or whether they're not admitting mistakes, and just regardless. So here it's Marcus Antonius, 161 AD. Are you ready for this? I love it. He said, if you are pained by external things, it is not that they disturb you, but it's your own judgment of them. And it is in your power to wipe out that judgment. If I'm angry because someone else is not admitting their mistake, his mistake, her mistake, then my frustration is because I am judging them. And as we quit the judgment, now there's a righteous judgment and an unrighteous judgment. A righteous judgment is it is what it is. If someone's lying, they're lying. But do I really know that? Or am I just assuming I know?
What if you do know it? What if you do know it?
If you do know it, then you give deference to a higher power wherever. Everybody has a boss.
You got to
eventually.
You got to speak out.
No, but what is that doing? What is that doing to the other side? I mean, I have to say that I feel a little ridiculous speaking up here because, I have approximately a 1/34,000th of the life experience of the other people here. But like when you speak out against, as opposed to trying to hear what they're trying to communicate, to me, that creates a deeper polarization.
Right.
Right. Meaning if there's actual evil being done, right, then yes, you need to prevent it because, as Professor Heschel said, some are guilty, all are responsible. Right. But I'm not talking about Vietnam, and I'm not talking about starving people in Somalia. Right. We're talking about sort of more of a, call it rhetoric or call it philosophical differences. Right. Now, obviously, those philosophical differences have real outcomes. But in the philosophical difference, like, well, what is this person trying to say? Right. Do people really hate, do people who are for the wall really hate Mexicans? Is that what they're trying to say? I mean, if they do, that's a different discussion, right? If they're all members of hate groups, then that's a very different discussion than, hey, we feel like we can't get, minimum wage jobs because these people are undercutting us. That's an issue you can take care of. Maybe they can start thinking about discussing.
And that's the thing, to try to get to what the real issue is.
The real issue.
And I think you do that by having the difficult conversations and talking face to face, and not being accusatory, but to understand. I mean, this is Covey saying first, is to understand the other person before you try to get them to understand you. And I think it's the same thing here, is that we need to be talking to the people we disagree with and try to get the common ground and understand what we both want, and then talk about the different ways to get there.
And when you can see through someone else's eyes without judgment, I mean, looking at it try to see it where they're coming from. then it's not to agreement. It's not necessarily to disagreement. It's not to argue with. It's just that as we can see that humanity in each other, we can have a little bit more. Because the fact of the matter is, or it seems to be, okay, I won't state it as a fact, that the younger generation is the only one that seems to have a cloud hanging over them that we're no longer surviving. You see, we've talked before, that the three of us that are here now, I've talked before, you're talking about being younger than us, which is obvious. But anyway, we've talked before about how that our country is not like it was at one time, and it isn't. You're right, it's not. Even when it was idyllic for us as kids or younger, so look how we were being looked down on by how this younger generation is not what,
right.
And we didn't see the. And we as a nation, not just a nation, but as a world, are getting to the point where we don't have any basic values. And we are becoming the generation that, my parents wanted us, their kids, to have a better life than they had. And I want our daughter and grandchildren to have a better life than we've had, all the way around, everything, not just stuff, but all the way around, But it's getting to the point that, we're having a fatalist. There's so many wars. We fought wars. We tried to make agreements by having war, and we keep having them and keep having them and keep having them, and we're in danger of not surviving. We're even killing off our oceans and our food supply and everything else.
Yeah.
Because we're not working together. And it starts in each person to do that. And to see, because there is a lot of good, I keep going back to, but it's the thing that the antidote for a snake bite is the venom of the snake that bit you. And so the antidote for hate is love. For anger is compassion. And it's got to start with the one. It's got to start with me, with you. And whenever I see all this, and I'm so judgmental towards something, and from my point of view, it may not be all that right, whatever right is. As I have the least bit of morals or the least bit of compassion or the least bit of humanity, to at least cross over and look and see where they're coming from. And then to continually realize, what is truth? Well, truth is law. Truth is, as we looked once before, it's gravity. That if we are not respecting of gravity, guess what? We're going to be the victim of gravity. And it's that can be, you see, if we live on the ground floor, then we think everybody looks down on us. Especially if we live in the basement, we think everybody's looking down on us, or we think that everybody above us is, and they are, but not really. They're looking down simply because to see down below, we have to look down, but it's not looking down on us to disparage. But as we ourselves begin to go up one more step, one more step, one more layer, one more layer, one more layer, we can begin to see that there are other views. That it's not that I may be thinking that life should be the Caribbean, but I begin to realize that, some people are living around dried up mud holes. And so therefore their perception of life is so much different from what mine is or what someone else's is, or maybe even what it could be or what it really is.
But the dried up mud holes, this is something I've been thinking about recently, if I can totally go on a tangent, right? There's a difference between someone who's living in squalor because of war or because of, and ethnic cleansing or whatever it is, right? To a group who's very happily living in the Amazon the way they have for the last 4,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
And those two groups of people could be living in, from our perspective, exactly the same standard of living, right? No running water, no toilets, exactly the same level of squalor. But for one group, this is their ancestral way of living, and they would, and all the studies seem to say that there's an extremely high level of happiness with those groups. And then there's the people who are like, well, we used to have bread every day and now we don't. We used to have running water or something, right? Or our river used to be drinkable and now it's not because of pollution. Anyway, it's just interesting that it's so much the way we choose to experience things.
It is. It is. And the judgments we pass against them.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something we have control over.
Yeah.
And it's looking at what we do have control over.
Yeah. Well, a real good example is my husband and I, just over a year ago, had chosen to adopt a vegan diet. And so we're not eating any animal foods, no sweets, and very few sweets. And people are like, oh, how can you don't you miss all that? And how can you do this? And are you going to do this forever? And we're like, no, because we know that it's better for our health to do this, and we're already feeling the benefits of it. And we don't go around trying to get everybody to change, but we're not thinking. I said that's the wrong way to look at it, is to think about what am I missing, is to think about how am I getting better by doing this, and what, because there's so many things that we have in our lives that we don't need to have. And we can do just fine without it. Yeah, we might miss it if we didn't have it, but we're going to get along just fine.
And whether that's food or whether it's stuff or, it's just being content where we are. And it's something that we have to learn. Is learn to being content, and it's learning to step aside and let those that are self-destructing, let them self-destruct.
Right.
That care. If you listen to my wonderful sage advice and you things go really great for you, then I'm going to rejoice with you. But you know what? You're the one that bought the ticket and got on the bus. I'm not the one that did it. You did it. And if you don't listen to any of this sage advice and you go on and you self-destruct, you know what? I'm going to be sad. But the bottom line is we are all free will agents. And we have a will to change our mind, or we have a will to keep on, because by crackies, I'm right. And I can get sicker being right. And I can get more ugly being right. And I can do a lot of things.
I can
being right.
Relationships by being right.
And which is more important, being right or relationship?
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends what type of relationship and what type of right it is.
Yes and no.
Exactly. The conversation my wife and I have consistently. And I'm quite very much of the opinion that it is in fact more important to be right, but only about the 0.1% of things in life that matter.
Yeah, well.
Right? 99.9% of things that don't really matter, right? It's in fact better to be nice.
You can be right all along. And if you have that relationship, you can be right and still have relationship. And you can be wrong and still have relationship.
But absolutely. I think inherently it's better to be right than to be, and it's important to be to do the right thing and to be right. But it's really only worth digging your heels in about a very, very small amount of things. Yeah. Right? And for everything else, they don't matter enough to enter that conversation.
I agree. And I think it's important. I think it's important to yield on almost everything. The small things, yield on them. It doesn't matter which restaurant we go to tonight. It really doesn't matter. Let the other person have their choice. It's the big things that I don't yield on. The small things I do yield on. But you got to know when to yield and when not to yield. But there's a lot of power in yielding.
There is.
Yielding is very, very important in relationships. And I've made it a habit to do that a good deal of the time with other people. But sometimes, no. No. You gotta be judgmental sometimes. Don't suspend judgment all the time.
I actually think the whole idea of suspending judgment is quite dangerous.
Yeah, I do too.
Honestly, the Martin Luther King, who was, as far as I'm concerned, the greatest civil rights leader in the last 150 years, right? At least in the United States, had no problem saying.
Who was that?
Martin Luther King.
Okay.
right? Had no problem saying in front of lots of people and for posterity, right? That he's a dream that he'll live in a country where people will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Mm-hmm.
That inherently means it's okay to judge people by the content of their character. And since I'm no prophet, the only way I can know is by their actions and by their words. But that the inherent, conceptually, judging isn't negative. It's judging people based on things that are not accurate. That is negative.
Yeah.
But if I judge this person to be a negative force in my life, I do need to disconnect from them. And if I don't, then I'm really damaging myself.
I agree.
That's my $2.50. That's with the inflation from when it used to be 2 cents.
Well, the righteous judgment and the unrighteous judgment. The righteous judgment is looking at it. It is what it is. The unrighteous judgment is thinking that we know what their motives are.
Oh, yes,
we think we can read that we're reading their mind, which may be the same thing you're saying, Avi.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. If it's
and you know what? I don't know where anyone's coming from.
Exactly.
I don't know. And even when they speak it out, a lot of times I don't know where they're coming from. You know, whether that's my husband or my grandchildren or whomever. Even whenever it's being spoken, there's still areas there where we misunderstand one another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's being willing to give the benefit of the doubt. And to realize that we're all on this planet together. And if we are going to survive as a species for our grandkids and great-grandkids and all that to come on and have a better life than we're currently having, and then we need to get along. And we need to be willing to speak up, but we also need to be willing to listen and to work at solutions that we can work together at. Because the laws of this universe are impersonal. The laws of this universe are impersonal. And the rains and the tsunamis and the hurricanes, and is there destruction? Yes. But it's not out to just get one person or out to get, it's impersonal. But we as individuals, we have humanity. And it becomes personal only when it affects us. And so, you know, all those things that we want to be fighting against, it has become a personal war for us only when it affects us. And we're not willing to maybe look at things from another perspective, or even if that perspective is 100% right on, it's, you know, what are you doing to yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally by being so angry over it? Just kind of step out of the line. You know, it's what is a deal and what is a deal breaker. Because I know there's a lot of times, well, this is a deal, and you know, it kind of needs to be worked through. And if it's a deal breaker, then I'm going to still hold you in high regard, even though we may be cutting some ties or whatever. As we come to the end here, I'd like to share the screen.
Okay.
With I want to share this. Okay, then I have to share again. And then I'll put it on this. This is by a speaker that I like, Joan Brzezinski. No. May I be at peace. May my heart remain open. May I awaken to the light of my own true nature. May I be healed. May I be a source of healing for all beings. May you be at peace. May your heart remain open. May you awaken to the light of your own true nature. May you be healed. May you be a source of healing for all beings. May there be peace on earth. May the hearts of all people be open to themselves and there's something else there that I can't
To
see.
each other.
And to each
And
other.
to each other. Okay, thanks. May all people awaken to the light of their own true nature. May all creation be blessed and be a blessing to all that is. And we can learn to do that, so that for the good of the whole, we speak, and sometimes we're heard, and sometimes we're not heard, and sometimes our speaking is effective, and sometimes it isn't, that for the good of the whole, it's to choosing to respect where someone else is coming from. Choosing to, and it is a choice.
Absolutely.
And
All right. Well, thanks. Great topic for today. And we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll see you next week.